I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 107 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Solo, PhD, LCSW, EMDR consultant, business coach for EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. So I have to say that my voice sounds a little lispy because I had a tooth extracted on earlier in the week, and I have to wear this little mouthpiece so it doesn't look like I have a huge tooth gap until there's some healing in my gums. So I sound like I have a lisp because I have a tiny little denture in my mouth for the next 3 months. Hopefully I'll get used to it and it won't sound so weird. Anyway, today's episode is going to deal with the idea, the sort of questions around, if you are an intensive therapist, how do you do that when you are an insurance-based therapist? Can you do intensives as an insurance-based therapist? And what about reimbursement for intensives if you're an out-of-network provider? So I know that for a lot of us, that one of the things we do to make our practice accessible for clients who, if we don't take insurance, is to have out-of-network reimbursement, right? So how does that work with multiple hours of therapy in a day, like you offer in an intensive? And we have lots of people who I talk to who are interested in offering intensives in their in-network insurance-based practice. Um, but how do you do this, right? How do you use insurance to pay for an intensive? You're in network. Does that work in network? How do you manage out of network benefits? Um, can you still have an insurance-based practice while you're offering intensives, or do you have to be exclusively private pay? How do I do this intensives as an insurance therapist? Well, here's the bad news, or should I say the real news. Unless things change a lot, insurance companies do not cover intensives, right? If you are lucky with offering an intensive, you can get insurance to cover one 90837 session, an hour. And beyond that, you're probably not going to get reimbursement. If you are someone who's in network, maybe the person can pay their copay for the first hour and the rest of the intensive is going to be out of pocket. So, if you're doing out of network, you can have your client submit a super bill like you would with any client and see if they get some reimbursement for that first hour. Um, Beyond that, insurance is not going to do it. So the truth is, if your practice is built on insurance-based clients and you want to switch to offering primarily intensives, something is going to have to change in the way your practice is structured. Certainly, if you want to keep your insurance-based caseload in practice, you could add in intensive a month to your insurance-based practice and have that be a private pay client. That would be an option, as long as you're not running afoul of any of the requirements of your insurance contract. I've never worked with insurance, so I have never been in network. So I don't know all the ins and outs of how that works. But so I don't know if there are any restrictions about companies that you're paneled with. I know that for some insurance companies, maybe all, if you do offer insurance and your client has that insurance, I mean, if you do take the insurance that your client has, you are obligated to have them as an insurance-based client. So that might mean that, if you accept Aetna and you have a client who wants to do an intensive and they have Aetna, that they have to use Aetna. So I don't know if they could be a private pay client. So you'd want to check that with the insurance companies you're paneled with. Yeah, how would that apply outside of an hour? I don't know, but you need to check that out. But say you want to do one intensive a week or a month, or one intensive a month, and keep your insurance-based practice. I mean, you could do that, right? But I will say that I want you to be careful about doing that. Maybe do that. You could try that and see how it goes. But um, if that's within your capacity to do, but I think that you need to be very honest with yourself about your capacity. I think one of the reasons I have talked to insurance-based therapists who are interested in intensives is that they're tired and they're burnt out and they're working too many hours, right? And that has a lot to do with what they need to make because the insurance reimbursement rates are low, right? Um, so, are you slammed and full as an insurance-based therapist? Like often people are 30 plus clients a week. Because as we know, the demand for in-network providers is so high, continues to be high. People want to use their insurance for therapy. And, if you are an insurance-based therapist and that's what you do, I applaud you. That's your choice. I will say that if you're an insurance-based therapist and you're not full, you really need to be doing something to market more because people want insurance therapists who take insurance. So you should be something with your marketing is awry. But um, but this, like, if you are seeing 30 plus clients a week and then you're like, I'll do an intensive on the weekend, right? That I guess could work. I feel like that sounds absolutely exhausting. And, you know, I don't know if a client is getting the most rested version of you, the most attuned and, competent version of you if you're seeing them on the weekend after you've seen 30 clients in a week, right? Um, I don't I could see you coming into a 15-hour intensive completely burned out. And, this intensive client is a premium fee client. And part of what they're paying for is your rested, attuned presence. Part of the premium is that you are not showing up totally exhausted and burned out, right? How is that a premium experience? That's why you need to be charging enough so you can be rested, right? Um, and the client is taking it very seriously. They're paying $6,000. They're going to be ready. They're going to be prepared. You also need to be coming in like that, right? Um, and you don't want to be coming in like a burnt out hull of a therapist, right? Like they're paying for like rested, engaged, connected, attuned you, not burnt out, hollowed out therapist you. If you really think this is something you can balance, amazing, I guess, but I want you to be really honest with yourself. Um, is it actually? And is it actually something that you feel like you can charge $6,000 for if you're not going to be, giving them your best self? So part of your process as an insurance-based therapist who wants to offer intensives is likely going to have to be what kind of practice you actually want and what you're willing to do to get there. So I actually was talking to a couple of people in the cohort from the group cohort of my 12-week program, the EMDR intensive 12-week intensive. We're in the midst of the summer cohort, and there are two insurance-based therapists right now, or three, who are grappling with a lot of these issues, right? And so, and it can be really intimidating and overwhelming and I know it is for these therapists I'm working with now to think about making that transition, which is why it's so helpful that they're in this group container where they can really work through this stuff because it is a lot. Um, you know, if you're going to make that shift from an insurance-based practice to an intensive practice, you have to do a lot of things. There's a lot of steps, and you want to be very intentional about thinking about how do you get off insurance? How do you reformulate your practice? It's a lot. Um, and trying to do it on your own, I think, can feel even more overwhelming. So, if you're an insurance-based therapist and you want to switch to intensives, my group program will be starting again in September, and there's always people in it who are still on insurance panels, and that's part of their journey. So if that's something you're interested in, I would highly recommend that you start paying attention to the podcast, to my emails, to my social media, because the wait list for the September cohort will be opening at the beginning of August, and there are some bonuses for the wait list, and it means you're guaranteed one of the 8 spots in the group. So if that's you, if this is speaking to you, snag one of those spots. It's really hard to do this on your own, right? It does feel like a huge amount of time. It's doable, but you could, why make mistakes that you don't have to make? Why not have the support of others that are going through the same thing? Um, you are going to have to go through a lot of like mental shifts, right? You might have to make it, you're going to have to make a shift in how the kinds of clients you might be seeing. Your time's going to look different. You're going to have some hard conversations with clients. You might have to, terminate with a number of clients. It's tough, but you're allowed to change your practice, right? That's your right as a business owner. You're not obligated to stay with any model that doesn't serve you. But I think part of what you have to do to figure out if it's serving you or not is doing some mindset work and stepping back and thinking about your life, thinking about your needs and your wants and your desires, and both the financial outcomes and the clinical outcomes for your clients that they're getting. Do you want better for them? All those things. How do you create that path to a structure in your practice that's supportive of that? So another thing about insurance companies is part of the reason that they don't support intensives is, well, there's a lot of reasons, but it's not the model that they're built to think about therapy in terms of, right? Um, Insurance companies will reimburse for more time for something like inpatient hospitalization or a partial program or IOP or something like that, where there's, longer time, like a longer span of time in a day that the client is in treatment. But like outpatient one-on-one therapy, there's no real framework for insurance companies to reimburse that. Do I have any idea if that will change in the future? I don't know anything about that, but I don't hear any talk about that. Certainly the intensive therapists I know are not banking on that happening, and so they're doing this privately. um, it could be that those like offering intensives would not be very profitable for insurance companies. And so why would they want to reimburse them? And certainly their rates would be lower anyway if they, you know, they're not going to be letting you charge $350 an hour and having that be the reimbursement rate, right? But the point is that should not be what you're waiting for insurance companies to catch up on this. You're going to be waiting a long time. I would not wait for that. And I get clients for intensives. Therapists I work with get clients for intensives. You can find those people who are willing to do it. They're not necessarily going to be the same people you're seeing now. But remember, it's not our job to assume anyone's financial situation, right? Um, like I said, like there's a good chance that some of your clients will not be able to do this. And maybe some of them will try it, or you just don't know, right? All you can know is what you want your practice to be, and that's what you're responsible for. Your clients are responsible for figuring out if the offering is something that they want, if there's a reason for them to work it out. And, I have been surprised by some of the people who have made an intensive work in my practice. And, I don't ever want people to feel pressured to do something they don't want to do, but I don't take non-intensive clients at this point. So, and there still are going to be times when someone hops on a consult and doesn't know that. So, you know, that happened to me a few weeks ago, and that person wasn't a good fit. And you know what? They weren't going to be a good fit anyway because they wanted to use their Medicaid insurance, and I am not on Medicaid. So someone just got my name without any context. They didn't know anything about me, but so they didn't have any idea when they got on the call with me that what they needed was not something I could do. So that will still happen to you. You will still get people who can't work with you for whatever reason. But when you do good marketing, you are going to increase the likelihood that people get on a call with you knowing that you're an intensive therapist and knowing that that's what they want. So that reduces some of that tension that you might worry about on those consult calls. But my point is that I have had other therapists that I've worked with who are insurance-based therapists who are able to switch to intensives or start offering intensives. So it's possible, right? I think one of the things that people worry about with only being private pay is that they're only going to be doing certainly intensives with like really rich people, right? That's not been my experience. I have had people who I have had done one with an EMT, done one with an unemployed person who was no longer in college, done one with someone who was a photographer, owned his own photography business, and certainly was not rolling in dough. So people make it work. If there are some people who can make it work and find ways to make it work. And then there are some options that I know of that people use to make the payment a little bit more accessible. There's something called Care Credit, which is basically like My dentist uses this company too. Basically, like a loan. It's a third party company, but it's to help people pay for medical bills. It's a loan, and they're taking out, like the client takes a loan out with them, but you're connected. I don't know exactly how it works. Like you are working directly with Care Credit, and the client is paying them back, right? Like paying Care Credit back. And I believe there's 6 months interest free, and then after that there is interest on the loan. But you get your full fee through Care Credit. The client's using Care Credit, and then I think there's something like a 6% processing fee, which I know seems high, but you like roll that into the price of the intensive. Um, and if that makes the intensive more accessible, um, it's probably worth that slightly higher rate, right? Like 6% of $6,000 is $360 or something. So it's a little bit more, like 1 hour more of the intensive, but not a huge amount, right? And you tell the client up front, of course, that if you're using Care Credit, there's this processing fee, and here's the terms of Care Credit, but it's a way to make it more accessible. I know people that use this in their intensives practice. There's also victim services in every state in the US that helps victims of crime pay for therapy. And every single state's program is different, and they vary widely in terms of how generous they are. I'm very lucky that in the state of Pennsylvania, where I worked for a long time, it's an incredibly generous fund, where you can get a lifetime grant of $35,000 for therapy. It's divided up per incident, so you can get $10,000 per incident that happened before the client was 18, as long as it happened in the state of Pennsylvania. $5,000 per incident, for clients over the age of 18, again, as long as the incident happened in the state of Pennsylvania, with a lifetime cap of $35,000. So obviously that would cover an intensive, right? I work with lots of survivors of sexual trauma, and so I use victim services a lot. It's different in Vermont, where I am now. In Vermont, services will pay $100 a session for 20 sessions, and you can charge whatever your session rate is. But Vermont will reimburse like basically $2,000 total, $100 per hour, for that. Nowhere near as generous, but I want to look into it because it might be, I don't know if they could do $100 an hour if they were doing an intensive with me. And so basically that would be a third less than 6,000. They could get, or 15 hours. I could make it 20 hours and call it, and yeah. So presumably they could get up to a third off of the cost of the intensive with victim services. So that's a substantial savings. So I would say look into what's available in your state, because every state has a victim services program. It's just that they're very, very different. And certainly that's a way of offering accessibility to people who really, really need support. So, but the reality is it's always going to be an expensive investment, no matter what, right? It's an investment with a high ticket price. You can't, I don't want you to be lowering your rates because you're afraid people won't pay it. I think it's natural to come from that mindset when you have worked with insurance. You believe like, this is what people think you pay to go to therapy. No one's going to pay more. But there's a whole world out there, people who are willing to pay more. And, and intensives is a different category than just your average therapy seeker, right? So I also tell all these people, of course, that there's the bang for the buck argument, right? Like you're getting a lot more value out of the time. That 15 hours of an intensive is like 6 months to a year of results, right? So they're doing a lot in 1 week, and so they're saving a ton of time and they're saving money, and the outcomes are, having ripple effects much sooner. So there's an actual financial argument to use for this being a good investment. But insurance companies don't create their reimbursement models based on what's best for client care. And any of those of you who've worked in insurance and have to fight for money, for coverage, for all those things, it's not really about that. It's about making money for the insurance companies. It's not about client care. I'm not saying it's 100%, money and 0% client care, But one of the reasons I work with insurance is that I don't want to. I don't want insurance. I don't work with insurance. I'm sorry. Is that I don't want insurance to dictate how I can run my business. I believe that I know what clients need, and that I can help them understand what investment, to making their healing better than just some random insurance company or insurance person. And I get to run a practice based on what I want to do, which is why I'm a private practitioner and why my intensives is the model that I've chosen. That's what I want to do. And the 45-minute model, clinical 50-minute model, does not exist because it's the best one out there. It does not exist because that's how therapy should be done, right? It exists because that's what insurance companies decided they wanted to do. They wanted, that to be how they reimburse. And I really don't think that 50 minutes is ever ideal for EMDR. At minimum, 90-minute sessions are what Francine and Shapiro recommended for EMDR. So 45, 50-minute sessions really for EMDR just don't cut it. But I'm not going to let insurance companies, no matter what, tell me the best way to practice. And I don't think you need to either. But all this to say, it can be a really daunting process to be like, I'm an insurance-based therapist, but I want to offer intensives. How the heck do I do that? I think a big part of the answer is you need support. And that's a big part of what my group program offers. I also have some spots for one-to-one coaching in the summer, but if you're interested in the group, again, it starts in September. You can join the wait list to get access to like one of the first spots and some bonuses. So there's options for you to start working on this soon. And just please feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk more about this. You can sign up for a consult call. The link is in the show notes. And we can just talk about it and see what might help you. Like I talked to somebody this morning. I didn't sign her up for something immediately. We just talked about, here's what I can offer you. If you're here's what the investment would look like if you're interested in doing it in the next few months. Like what could work for you. I'm happy to talk if you have more questions. It's not a hard sell. I'm just happy to chat with you and see what might be supportive. So that's what that 30-minute call is for. So the link is in the show notes. And we can just chat for half an hour and see where you're at and how I might be able to support you. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Next week, we're going to talk about how do you fill the time in your intensives? What do you do with 15 hours? A topic I've talked about a bunch, but still comes up. So I will bring that up again. And thanks as always for listening to the podcast. I hope you've had a chance to kind of mull over your insurance and intensives questions. Reach out to me with any thoughts about the episode and take care. And I will talk to you soon.